Hello everyone, my name is Natalia Viktorovna Енгай. I work at Nazarbayev Intellectual School, Taldykurgan. The topic of our seminar is Assessment for Learning for Receptive Skills Development. The objectives of our seminar are to consider suggested learning objectives for formative assessment as a tool to develop learners' receptive skills and to clarify the role of feedback in assessment for learning. Firstly, I'd like you to choose a right version for the following sentence. Assessment's Latin root is to evaluate words, to equalize levels, to sit beside, to talk up. And you are definitely right if you choose answer C, to sit beside. It means that a teacher watches the process of students' learning, supporting them through the whole way, trying to do the best to organize effective assessment for learning. According to our practice, the first step to organize effective assessment for learning is to clarify learning objectives at the beginning of the class and be sure that they are clear for learners and for teachers. Let's look through the learning objectives from our curricula for grade 12. As you know, we have 8 learning objectives for listening and 9 for reading. The key words which we meet in the learning objectives are: for listening, understand, recognize, deduce. For reading, understand, recognize, deduce, skim, and read. They are clear enough for perception, specific, measurable, achievable, and realistic. At the same time, according to the observation which was held at the beginning of the school year, the most questionable objectives for listening are: L4. Understand implied meaning in unsupported extent talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. This learning objective induces the following questions. What can be considered as implied meaning? What is the difference between implied meaning and making conclusion? L6. Deduce meaning from context in unsupported extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. Is it a fragment with 30% of unknown words? Should we deduce meaning of the words or ideas? L7. Understand speaker viewpoints and extent of agreement, both implicit or explicit, between speakers on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. How is the extent of agreement defined? Whether we totally agree, partially agree, or something like this one. L8. Recognize inconsistencies in argument in extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general or curricular topics. Is this learning objective the same as in critical thinking? And learning objectives for reading are 3. Skim a range of lengthy texts with speed to identify content meriting closer reading on a range of more complex and abstract general and curricular topics. Should we read the same text or find new information with details? R4. Read a wide range of extended fiction and non-fiction texts on a variety of more complex and abstract general and curricular topics with confidence and enjoyment. What is the extension of a wide range? Whether 3 or 4 sources enough or we should use more than 10? R8. Select and evaluate paper and digital reference sources to check meaning and extend understanding. Should we use Raven technique to consider reputability, ability to see, vested interest, expertise, and neutrality? And R9. Recognize inconsistencies in argument in extended texts on a range of more complex and abstract general and curricular topics. So, we have the same question as in L8. Let's watch how our students and teachers try to explain the meaning of these learning objectives. If you notice some inconsistencies, it could give you an opportunity to do the next step.
12R3. Skim a range of lengthy texts with speed to identify content meriting closer reading on a range of more complex and abstract general and curricular topics. I understand this as reading an information that is very, very complex, and identifying key points of this to imbibe the information.
Understand speaker viewpoints and extent of agreement, both implicit or explicit, between speakers on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. First of all, it is learning objectives. As we could understand during the speech, the student must understand the extent of agreement of one of the speaker. As it could be seen, it could be explicit or implicit. Implicit agreement could be understood during the simple evidence of a speaker, but to understand the explicit viewpoint, we must decide whether the speaker is agree or disagree. How could we do it? First of all, we should analyze the evidence and the facts which the speaker is telling us, and according to them, we must decide whether he agree or disagree with this statement. Then we should understand his viewpoint. It means that he could be either, and it could be either for or against the topic. Also, we must be familiar with different variety of topics, and we should know that we should have the ability to understand the grammar.
So the objective is 12L8, recognize inconsistencies in arguments in extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar, general and curricular topics. So I understand this objective as that students should be able to know the general structure of the argument, and they should notice the arguments in the whole speech of the speaker while they're listening to them, and they should be able to realize and recognize the type of the arguments, whether it's persuasive or just the supported arguments with some facts and some anecdotes and so on.
My learning objective is to recognize inconsistencies in argument in extended text on a range of more complex and abstract general and curricular topics. And so there are some cases when authors give own examples of their text, and my job is to find these inconsistencies. And so how can I do it? The arguments and the conclusion, they must be suitable and the same. And firstly, what is the arguments? Arguments, it's a series of some provings. And in conclusion, the end should be suitable for the arguments.
I have 12L6 lesson objective, and it is deduce meaning from context in unsupported extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. And I understand that objective as a person must have to understand meaning of some words or some topics according to keywords that he knows, or maybe emotions and feelings that the speakers introduce.
Understand implied meaning in unsupported extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. It means that some speech or another conversation that we hear can hide some information or the main idea. So it is possible to find out the main topic or idea of the conversation of a speech by hearing the facts, different reasons of a person that speaks, and find out something specific.
Recognize inconsistencies in argument in extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. In my opinion, for determining strong and weak sides of an argument, it is really important to understand the whole context of the talk. If in the argument there are correlated initial statement, evidence and conclusion, this argument can be considered as reliable. But if the argument is really persuasive and really emotional and doesn't contain a lot of data, evidence and some facts, this argument can be called as really weak.
So the given learning objective is to skim a range of lengthy texts with the speed to identify content meriting closer reading on a range of more complex and abstract, general and curricular topics. This learning objective implies that we have to be able to skim a text to identify the main points, the key points which will be useful for us, for our understanding of the text, briefly, for brief explanation or something like that. But actually, this also implies that we will be familiar with a text based on some points which we deduced while we were reading. However, it is not about the full understanding of the text, it's about just being familiar with it, with the general topic or general topics of some particular parts of or some features. This learning objective includes some tasks which are connected with defining the main points or the main themes of parts of the text and making the coincidence between the number of the parts and its general theme and so on.
The objective is to deduce meaning from context in a supported extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. As I understood, this is a learning objective, not lesson objective, because it should be achieved during the educational process. I think that this objective can be achieved via the understanding of specific vocabulary which could be noticed in any dialogue of two people. As an example, the dialogue about the alternative resource of energy, if I would hear the words solar panels or wind or energy, I would understand that probably there are two scientists which are talking about the methods of gaining the energy from the non-fossil and non-fuel resources. The other way is to understand the intonation in order to distinguish what about what is the situation of between two people which held the dialogue. As an example, if one person says something about the food and starts to shout at another person, and the second one says sorry, and so on, probably there is a situation in the restaurant where the waiter has brought the incorrect order to the person. I think that this learning objective is really important because in real life situations we don't usually know the whole situation, we hear only the fragments of the dialogue, and from these components of the speech we need to know what about which information, what is the topic of the information which we hear, and to adopt ourselves and probably to hold the conversation moving on and on.
Hello, my name is Panmarova Nadezhda Alexandrovna. I'm a teacher of English in grade 12. Today I'm going to tell you about reading objectives from the grade 12 course plan. So the first one, 12R3, which is to skim a range of lengthy text with speed to identify content meriting closer reading on a range of more complex and abstract general and curricular topics. In other words, this objective is to attract the attention of the readers of a particular text, where the students can quickly read the particular article or text, and the teacher may use an open question to attract further attention to the detailed reading of the text, and a simple activity like true-false exercise can help students to focus on the understanding of the whole text in details in general. The next objective is 12R8, which is to select and evaluate paper and digital reference resources to check meaning and extend understanding. So as I understood, this objective is to maybe using the Raven strategy, which students know they can analyze the author of the article and check the objectivity and aim of the article itself. Or maybe if this article is about a specific subject, they can use like as different electronic resources to check the meaning of the notions, specific notions in the text. Or maybe just to translate the new vocabulary appearing in the article. The next one is 12RD, which is to recognize inconsistencies in argument in extended text on a range of more complex and abstract general and curricular topics. So here students can apply the argument structure knowledge to identify two opposite views in the same article. It can be one author or two different authors, or maybe just positive and negative sides of the same problem in one text, and where the students can simply maybe discuss after finishing reading the article what were the inconsistencies in the piece of text.
Good morning, dear colleagues. My name is Irina Zinchuk and I am a teacher of English at Nazarbayev Intellectual School. Today I would like to share my understanding of some of the learning objectives for listening in 12th grade. The first one is 12L4, which tells understand implied meaning in unsupported extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. So my understanding of this objective is that when the speaker does not express his thoughts directly, but he uses such skills as paraphrasing, and thus the students have to understand the meaning of that by using their synonyms. Okay, and the possible task here could be most probably the multiple choice task. The second objective is 12L6, which tells deduce meaning from context in unsupported extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. So here the most suitable task would be the summary completion and of course the multiple choice tasks. The next objective is 12L7, understand speaker viewpoints and extent of agreement, both implicit and explicit, between speaker on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. So the possible task here that we usually use in 12th grade is when the students have to mark sentences as either yes or no. And the last objective is 12L8, recognize inconsistencies in argument in extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. So here most probably the speaker will have a monologue where he expresses two contradicting or opposing points of view, and that the students have to be very attentive and to choose the options that he or she considers to be correct. So the possible answers here again either multiple choice or the summary completion or sentence completion tasks. Thank you for your attention.
Summarizing all versions mentioned above and considering listening as work with the text, we can say that these learning objectives are connected to intensive and extensive reading. Intensive reading, when the objective of reading is to achieve full understanding of logical argument, rhetorical pattern of the text, emotional, symbolic or social attitudes and purposes of the author, linguistic means to an end, for study of content material that are difficult. For extensive reading, students select that they want to read. The purposes are usually related to pleasure, information and general understanding. Reading is its own reward, and reading is individual and silent. And I'd like to focus your attention on learning objective 4. Read a wide range of extended fiction and non-fiction texts on a variety of more complex and abstract general and curricular topics with confidence and enjoyment. How do you check whether your students enjoy the read material? We suggest our learners to use the following simple table. Of course, the table can be constructed in a case of the range of emotions according to your and your learner's preferences. As you can see, we suggest the distribution of books according to the emotions, whereas usually we describe our emotions according to the books. This is the example how our students do it. Usually, the first and the second column are full of information, while the third one has a small amount of points. At the same time, learners' notes form the basis of the following discussion of the read books. As you can see, the third column of the table contains controversial points. Author's style is too simple and ordinary. At the same time, the book is written fabulously and improbably. Perhaps this type of notes will inspire you for the next step. If you are sure that learning objectives are clear for you and for your learners, you are ready to do the next step. You have determined learning goals and defined success criteria. You are sure that you have an appropriate amount of success criteria and they are clear for understanding and correlate with the chosen learning objective. You have used the variety of different tests to elicit evidence of learning and used the health-saving techniques to interpret the evidence and identify the gap. But I'd like you to pay special attention to a feedback stage, because eliciting the evidence of learning, interpreting the evidence and identifying the gap, teachers use a wide variety of assessment tasks, learning tasks and activities which sometimes are common for listening as well as reading. At the same time, teachers should remember about a big difference between assessment for learning and assessment of learning. As you remember, assessment of learning is typically defined as a summative evaluation that usually takes the form of a grade that judges a student after they are done learning. Joe Bauer, an English teacher from Canada, points that grading practices have no place while students are still learning. I support his idea that assessment for learning cannot be just the training of various tasks, but providing children and the information they need to improve. He says, as a classroom teacher, I have come across a lot of different rubric designs. Yet, despite their differences, there is always one common denominator. Every rubric I have ever seen involves the use of a fixed measurement scale. By definition, a grade is any attempt to reduce learning to a symbol. While it's true that these scales can be represented in a number of different ways, numbers, letters, descriptors, smiley faces, stickers, stars, etc. These reductionist scales are inevitably experienced by the student as a judgment. Therefore, assessment for learning is not effective if learners are not provided with feedback and engaged into self-reflection. I'd like to suggest you a short video how to make an effective feedback. Iowa Department of Education suggests following 3 tips to construct descriptive feedback. Feedback needs to be focused on the learning objectives rather than on comparisons with other students. Give specific feedback focusing on success and improvement rather than correction or as a restatement of the learning target. For example, provide, for instance, and specific advice. Focus in improvement suggestions on closing the achievement gap between current and desired performance. Let's consider the example of feedback on learners' work on L4. Understand implied meaning in unsupported extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. The task was constructed on the basis of TED Talks, The Psychology of Your Future. And as you can see, the most part of the questions contain the word explain to identify the implied meaning of the suggested concepts. The first, in your own words, explain the misconception about the power of time. The next, briefly explain the pattern of value changes over the time. Explain the idea about the time as a powerful force. The third question correlates to L2. Understand specific information in unsupported extended talk on a range of familiar and unfamiliar general and curricular topics. Going ahead, I can say that 5 given answers out of 6 are correct, except for the second one about the pattern of value changes. And the feedback example. It's great that you have your own clear position according to the pattern value of changes over the time. However, the main goal of the task is to understand what speaker implied into the given issue. Try to operate with factual information from the suggested source next time. For example, according to the fragment, something means something. As you know, reflecting helps students to develop language skills and review their effectiveness rather than just carry on doing things as students have always done them. Let's watch some examples from our students.
Well, I can say about my reading skill that they are at the medium level because I have some difficulties in completing the tasks from reading, and sometimes I get 25 or 30 marks out of 50 or 40, and the difficulty that I meet is the questions about true, false, or not given. And to solve this problem, I read different types of texts, maybe articles, and try to construct the questions that are related to choosing whether the information is true, false, or it is not given. And also I underline the keywords, the main information that carry the main idea of the text.
Well, I've been learning English not for so long time, but I could say that listening skills which I have right now are much better than I had before. For example, I can complete in a correct way at least I think 35 tasks or 38 tasks out of 40, and I think it is an appropriate level, not for a native speaker, but for the speaker for whom it is the first language in his life. Speaking about the methods of receiving the information from the listening tasks, I could say that the way that I do it is just it needs a lot of attraction and a lot of attention to the voice of the speaker in order to differentiate between his accent and the accent which is really comfortable for me. Moreover, I can also add on top of that I need to differentiate where the information is fake and where it is true. Because sometimes in listening tasks, the information is on purpose given not correct for making the person who completes the tasks to choose the incorrect answer. I think that in order to improve my skills, I could do more tasks because usually they are typical and only the topics change. Also, I need to listen to the native speakers more and more for making any accent which will appear in the task comfortable for my ears.
As you remember, after feedback stage, we go to planning of learning instructional modifications, which go out of feedback, and then to scaffolding new learning that can be new topics for the seminars. These stages are individual for the certain learners and depend on the current needs. At the same time, we practice some common rules to improve reading skills. You can see them all on your boards. You don't have to be a great reader to get the point. Some people read fast and remember everything. Others read slowly and take a couple of time to get all the information. It doesn't matter really, so long as when you read, you get the information you are seeking. The second one. Know why you are reading. Are you reading for entertainment or to learn something? Decide why you are reading before you start, and you'll greatly improve your comprehension and your enjoyment. The third one. You don't need to read everything. Not every magazine, letter, and email you receive contains information you need. In fact, most of it is simply junk. Throw it away. Hit the delete key. Just doing this will double the amount of time you have available to read. The fourth one. You don't need to read all of what you do read. Do you read every article or every magazine, every chapter of every book? If so, you are probably spending a lot of time reading stuff you don't need. Be choosy. Select the chapters and articles that are important. Ignore the rest. The fifth rule. Scan before you read. Look at the table of contents, index, topic headers, photo captions, etc. This will help you determine if A. You have a real interest in this reading, and B. What information you are likely to get from. The sixth one. Prioritize your reading. You can't read everything all at once and wouldn't want to. If it's important, read it now. If it's not, let it wait. The seventh one. Optimize your reading environment. You'll read faster and comprehend more if you read in an environment that's comfortable for you. The eighth. Once you start, don't stop. Read each item straight through. If you finish and have questions, go back and reread the pertinent section. If you don't have questions, you got what you needed and are ready to move on. The ninth rule. Focus. Remember, you are reading with a purpose, so focus on that purpose and the material. If you lose interest or keep losing your place, take a break or read something else. You can keep track of where you are by following along with your hand. This simple technique helps you focus and increase your concentration. And the last one for reading. Practice. The more you read, the better reader you'll become, and smarter too. So, feed your mind, read. And some tips created by our learners. Watch movies in English, listen to English songs, watch the news in English, communicate in English. Some Summarizing all the things mentioned above, we can go to the conclusion that assessment for learning contains the instruments for school community to operate with for skills improvement. Here you can see the sources which were used for this presentation, and you can find the materials on this site. Thank you for your attention.